Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent podcast. I'm Jason Abrams, and this is the place where we lift the curtain on the world of real estate like never before. Every week, I sit down with visionaries, pirates, and mavericks. We're here to document, demonstrate, and most importantly, demystify their game-changing models and systems. What secrets propel them to the top? And how are they living their dreams? This is about passion, it's about strategy, but above all, it's about real, tangible success. So buckle up and let's dive in. This is the Millionaire Real Estate Agent podcast. Have you noticed that the world has been gamifying lately, friends? It feels like everything we do, especially online, now has a game attached to it. And whether that's variable rewards or actual rewards, our lives are simply becoming a set of scoreboards and gamification. Look no further than one of the fastest growing real estate teams in the country to tell us how they're using it in their business. This team out of Boise, Idaho does over $200 million a year. They are going to teach us exactly how to motivate people through the dip and use contests to get people to take actions. I am talking about none other than City of Tree Real Estate, which is owned by Brent Hanson and Chase Craig. Today we're going to sit down with Brent. Sit back and buckle up. This is Brent Hanson. Brent, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Jason?
I am fantastic, and I'm excited to talk about Cities of Trees Real Estate. It's awesome. Walk me in, though. Before we get there, I ask everyone the same question. Before all the success you had, how did you end up in the greatest industry in the world?
Oh, man. Well, I have actually been in professional sales since 1999, and I landed in selling mortgages. I started in 2007. So think about that timing. Selling mortgages through one of the biggest downturns our country's ever experienced. But I was lucky enough to land in a type of mortgage sales. It was nationwide. It was VA and FHA streamlined refinances. So we were helping people lower their rate. They weren't having to get an appraisal or income verification, which at that time was a very important product. And so for 7 years, from 2007 to 2014, I was working out of a cubicle. I was working 6 or 7 days a week. Hardly saw the sunlight. You think I look pale now. I mean, I looked like a vampire at the time. 12 hours a day.
And that's a grind, right? You're a telephone guy, right? You have a headset on and you're just grinding?
Yeah, 300 to 800 dials a day. So I sold nationwide. So what I did is I'd get in at 6 a.m. and I would start calling East Coast. And then by 6 p.m., I was finishing my calls on the West Coast. And then when I was done, I would then work on all the apps that I created throughout the day.
Dude, how did you feel physically? Did that give you energy or take energy from you? Like, did you wake up in the morning dreading the day, or did you wake up and say, this is the greatest job on the planet?
I think it was a combination of both, actually. I think in the grind, I found all those dopamine kicks, as I was getting people to say yes. And physically, it was very taxing. I mean, I was very low energy when I wasn't at work or on the weekends. It's interesting that you bring that up because that's what got me looking outside of that industry, because I was making really good money at the time. I was, as an individual producer, selling 40 mortgages per month on average. So, I mean, it was a lot of business. And in 2013, rates went up about 1% in June of 2013. So I went out and I had to start looking for what we call purchase business, start working with real estate agents. And as I'm out, I'm like, wow, these guys get to be out and about. These guys are out doing creative things and they get to say no to a meeting with me, which that's kind of cool. I think maybe I could be one of them.
Wow.
And then that's what introduced me to the idea of getting into real estate.
So then you get the license. Do you have success right off the bat?
I would say I had pretty decent success because I was already used to this volume mindset. I went to a different brokerage. I started at a different brokerage. They shall be unnamed. I won't mention them. Great people, but I started at this brokerage and, I was consistently closing in the first 18 months when I was with them, 8 deals a month.
Okay, now how were you getting the 8 deals? Because that's, as a solo agent, that's a ton of business.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, I did have a partner that I started with. And here's the thing. I didn't know the language of real estate. I didn't know about setting appointments and buyer and seller appointments and, the contact sport that it was. I was used to prospecting with lists. I didn't know how to get those lists in real estate yet. So what I did every day I came in, I just said, what am I doing right now to find someone who wants to buy real estate? So I did everything from go to garage sales. I went to car dealerships. And
hang on a second. Okay, so you go to a garage sale. Like I go to a garage sale and I'm like, hey, how much is this ashtray? And then I try to negotiate. You probably said something different. If you're going to a garage sale tomorrow, what are you doing there?
I used the garage sale items as a reason to spark conversations with anybody there. But the goal was to figure out like why these people were selling all their products. Like, are you moving? Are you not moving? But surprisingly, I got into conversations with all kinds of people at garage sales and produced a ton of leads that way.
Okay, you go to a car dealership. I go there just to yell at somebody. What are you saying when you go?
Well, so here's what I did. I went to the dollar store and bought a bunch of plastic containers. I went to inexpensive food outlet and bought bulk candy. And originally I thought, hey, I'm going to go ask them if I can put the candy on their desk with my name and my phone number, thinking their consumers would be calling me. What I discovered was I was going into these dealerships once a week to refill the candy. So now I was getting into a relationship with the salespeople, the desk manager, the finance, the parts people, because I was in there refilling their candy dish on a weekly basis. That's where the magic happened because I started selling all of them homes. So,
well, that's brilliant. So I got garage sales, I got car dealerships. Where else did you go?
The other thing I did, because at the time I didn't do open houses. I should have done more open houses. I know that now, but what I did in place of that is a home would hit the market and I would identify ones that were vacant and they were going to have a lot of traffic or activity on the first weekend. I would work in front of it. So I would take my laptop, set my phone up as a hotspot, and I would work in front of it. And when someone would stop to look at the sign, I would just hop out and say, oh my gosh, hey, I'm just getting ready to preview this home. You want me to walk you through it? And so it was, serendipitous that I just happened to be there and walk them through and do a tour and, probably 5 out of 10 times land a client.
That is unbelievable, friends. Needless to say, follow all the rules and regulations in your local market and make sure that you're on the right side of all of the laws. But Brent, this is so out of the box. Like you just named 3 things that have never been said on this show before.
Wow.
You just think about the world differently, huh?
Well, again, I came into this with a volume mindset. I just had to figure out any which way I possibly could to get in front of people that I knew wanted to buy or sell. So I was averaging 8 deals a month, and I go to the broker at the time and I'm like, how do I scale? What's the next step? Like I'm stuck at 8. I'm stuck at 8 every month. My first 6 months in the business, I did 30 something. My first full year, I did 64. And they were kind of pointing me in different directions. But needless to say, the team leader at KW at the time had invited me to a class called Recruit Select. And I went to this class and I'm like, oh my gosh, my current broker doesn't have a page on what to do next. KW has a book on what to do next. I'm at the wrong place. And I realized really quickly, like I wasn't a salesperson. I needed to be a business owner and I just didn't know how, which introduced me to the whole KW ecosystem.
Dude, I love that. And so now kind of fast forward because you come out of Recruit Select with some amazing skills. You understand now how to bring talent into your life and your organization. You understand how you're going to go build and scale this business. The business that you've built today, pushing 200 plus million on annualized volume is astounding. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What's the thing, man? Like, what's the thing that y'all do better than everybody else that's driving this sort of growth?
We are very culture driven. So, I mean, I could go, 4 different ways with this. But one thing that I think that as a team we really love is games or challenges. And I think we're really good at it. Let me start with why I think
Hang on, I'm going to interrupt you. Gang, you know what time it is, right? You know that Brent is about to drop that knowledge. You don't have to take the notes. He is going to tell you exactly how to gamify the system and use competitions to band everyone together in the growth mindset. We're taking the notes. The notes come out every Thursday. If you don't get them, go to MREAnotes.com. That's MREAnotes.com. Put in your email and they will come to you. Brent, tell me exactly how to use games and contests to accelerate my growth.
All right, Jason. So I actually think it's more important to start with the why. And here's what I mean by that. Like, we can talk schematics all day long. We can talk about the results we've gotten, which have been phenomenal. We can talk about the execution of it, which of course I'll supply our playbook. The execution is important, but the why I think is equally, if not more important. So I'm going to backtrack to 2022 where this dawned on me. So, 2022, we were on the heels of the best year of our life in 2021. I think a lot of real estate agents experienced that. And in 22, obviously in Q2, the brakes were hit on the market as rates went up. And I was coaching with all of my agents, and they're all dealing with a very similar thing, which was they were realizing that it was going to take significantly more effort and significantly more skill set in order to produce in this new market. And during that same time, I was teaching a class, which I still teach today. It's called Momentum. And I was teaching through two separate models, and it dawned on me. This is where this whole concept was born. So number one, like games and challenges, this is not something new to sales organizations. But the why or the perspective that I've kind of stumbled on, I think is. So let me walk you through the models, and I'll start with what I call the clarity curve. But basically, I want you to imagine an inverted bell curve. And there's three sections to this model. It's called the clarity curve. And the section one is the top left. The middle section is the dip. And then the right section is the top right. So I'll explain the first section. It's on the left. It's called the yearn phase. And the yearn phase is something that all of us experience when we take on a new project, start a new job, get in a new relationship. We do anything new. And that's where chemistry is high and clarity is low. Now, inevitably, as you're working through this new project, new job, new relationship, reality sets in. And that's where you enter into the middle section, that dip, which we call the earn phase. And that's where chemistry is low and clarity starts to go up dramatically. This is where most salespeople operate most of the time, to be frank. And it's because success is boring. If you stick to the foundations of your business, which is what you should do, it's very clear what you should do, but it's hard to kind of get that chemistry going to do it on a daily basis consistently. And if you do those foundations, which can look different for every business, long enough, you'll end up at the right side of that curve, which is called the enduring phase, where chemistry and clarity is high. This is where the fruits of your labor, right? You're feeling the endorphin kicks from all of the success and results that you're getting. So in the dip, here's what I typically teach people is that you need to hack that and you need to find chemistry somehow. And what I would teach people is purpose is how you do that, your big why. So then this is where the second step of this model comes in. And I got this out of page 72 of the MREA book. Gary Keller taught this thing. It was called the why triangle. And I want you to imagine a triangle, and at the top is your big why, your purpose. But what Gary so brilliantly did is he gamified it, and he showed different levels of whys moving down to the base of that triangle. And so one why might be, buying an investment property this year. Another why might be, hey, I told my kids if I did X, Y, or Z, I'd take them on a dream vacation this year. But the base of that triangle, this is where the epiphany happened for me. The base is games and challenges. And the reason why is games and challenges are within our control of the foundations, the clarity, what we should be doing. So it sits inside of that earn phase as far as clarity goes, but we're hacking the emotional reaction to the fun and the competition driven through a game or a challenge. So once you understand the psychology of how agents operate inside of that dip and how you can leverage that Y triangle to gamify and help your team produce more, that's where the real magic happens and how you can create an effective game. And the one thing I would suggest anybody applying a game to their business in the future is get your agents on board with understanding that you're actually using this game or this challenge to help them get the chemistry in that earn phase or that challenging activity.
Walk me through. How do I do it?
Yeah. So the playbook that I have, first of all, you have to have a plan. And so we have tried 90 and 90 a million times, and we kept failing at it. And we realized that the reality is you have to have a beginning plan and you have to know how to stick with it. Because just like in real estate, where, you start out in real estate and you're on your high, and then you drop into a dip because reality sets in. The same happens with a challenge. Halfway through the challenge, reality sets in. It's not fun anymore. So this plan helps you keep it alive through the entire process. So the first thing is you have to know, what is the goal of the challenge? And is it going to be an ongoing challenge, one that you have long-term, so it could be a year long or longer, or is it going to be an interval challenge, like over a quarter? What adoption do we want to focus on in this challenge? And I'm going to put a mark in that one because that one's a really important one to talk about. And then what metric will the challenge focus on? And are there going to be teams or no teams? So that's the first set of questions that we go through.
Okay, well then walk me through each of these and give me the thinking.
All right, so what's the goal of the challenge? So I'm going to use 90-90 as an example.
What's 90-90?
90 listings in 90 days. I think most people at Keller Williams have probably heard that phrase. It's a challenge that we learned about, several years ago. So the goal of the challenge for us in a 90 and 90 is to increase the amount of listings inventory, create a fun competition over a 90-day period, and the adoption that we want to focus on is agent daily reporting. So here's why that's important to incorporate adoption. Have you ever played fantasy football, Jason?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever seen anybody play fantasy football that didn't really watch football?
Yeah.
But what do they do when they play fantasy football?
They check stats all day long.
And they're watching the games, they're into it, right? So what we know is when someone's in a challenge, they're more into the thing we want them to be into. And so for us, we say, what adoption do we want them to take on over the next 90 days that we want them to leave with? And so if our agent reporting is down, not where we want it, we'll say that's what we want to focus on for adoption. In other words, in the challenge, if you're not hitting the reporting metric, you don't get to participate in the weekly prizes.
Got it.
So now they're incentivized to adopt the activity on top of push forward and hit the competition metrics.
Makes perfect sense to me. Okay, so what else?
So then we look at the metrics of the challenge. So in this case, it's a 90 listings in 90 days. So we know the metrics that we're going for is 90 signed listings. Now you could define that in any way you want. You could define it as 90 buyer and seller listings or 90 seller listings. And for us, we were looking at 90 seller listings at the time. And then you have to prepare for this, right? So after you answer those questions, you have to go into being prepared for the actual contest. And so that brings a whole nother set of questions into the scope. So what's the budget? What are the rules? What are the prizes? How will we get weekly participation? What are the leaders, if applicable? And how will we choose team members if there are a team? And then how will we communicate this? And how will we communicate this is probably the most important thing. You have to put a cadence and a form.
Let's hit them in order. So let's start at the top. So the first one you mentioned is budget.
Yep.
Talk me through that. What do you mean?
We basically say, all right, if we hit the max, what's the max we're willing to pay? And if we hit 75% of that, what are we willing to pay? If we hit 50% of that, what are we willing to pay?
When you say willing to pay, you're talking prize money in that moment.
Correct.
And is it always cash, or do you sometimes take that cash and buy something with it, like a trip to Mexico, whatever it is?
It's a multitude of things. So in this particular 90 and 90, it was all cash. For us, we had weekly cash prizes. So if they hit the metrics, they'd be able to come up and pop a balloon. Balloons had anything from 20s to hundreds in it. And we knew, like, theoretically how many we'd be giving away a week. So we figured that into the budget. And then we had a pool of money. So In other words, if we hit the max, which was 111 listings, if we hit the max, we'd pay out a $15,000 pot. So whichever team won would get that pot.
I get 90 listings in 90 days. What I don't understand is how then 112 listings could have been the max. Why wasn't 90 listings the max?
So we hadn't hit 90 in that quarter ever. Hitting 90 still had a $5,000 pool, but we put the stretch goal out there, right? So we're like, hey, we're going for 90. But if we're crushing it, guys, and if we're doing all the right things and we actually hit a stride, like we're going to incentivize that as well. So we put kind of some bumpers in place.
So then in this contest, you gave away how much money weekly? Ballpark.
We had a $1,500 budget for the total as far as cash prizes. So we just divided that by the 12 weeks, and then we put different denominations into the balloons.
And then a maximum of $15,000 was going to be given to the individual with the most listings or the team within the team with the most listings?
So you had to hit certain metrics. You had to have your added to database percentage proper. Your agent reporting had to be at 74%, meaning you reported your numbers 74% of the time. So if you were on a team and the team won, 74% reporting in order to qualify for that pond or that pool. And then you had to at least sign 2 listings in that team in order to qualify. So if you hit those 2 things in the team that won, you got to split the pond or the pool.
And in this scenario, you're explaining what the rules of the contest were, which of course is the next one after your budget, which is exactly how are we going to do this and how are we going to measure it? Yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Then we hit the prize already, which was the 15 grand.
Yep.
Walk me through the next one.
So what we also did in the prizes, one other thing, and this is important because you're hitting the popping the balloons weekly. That's kind of hitting that dopamine weekly. But then you also want to reward the top person. So what we did with the very top person on the prize is we had a 2-day Airbnb stay in the mountains that the top person, as long as they hit the metric, would qualify for. So we also wanted to reward the very best person as well.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So after prizes, then it's how are we going to get weekly participation? And that kind of bled into the prizes. We said the way we're going to get weekly participation is the team leaders are going to communicate, and they're going to communicate through their channel, their group channel. And when they communicate, they're going to ensure everybody's doing their added to database. What I mean is their daily reporting. And then the other piece that we did to incentivize weekly participation is the weekly prizes and being able to pop the balloons, public accountability, doing it in front of the team Monday morning. You go up and pop it. Here's what I found is the ultimate prize is the commission at the end of the deal. But man, people will do some crazy stuff to pop a balloon and hopefully get $100 in it.
Yes.
So the next thing is who are the leaders if applicable? And so some challenges you need to have teams, and some challenges as you develop it through this playbook that we have, you may realize that you don't need to have teams. It's a full team push. And I can explain what that means in a second. But if there are teams, you pick a team leader, and then the rule for the team leader is they are the cheerleader, they are in charge of the comms, and they are in charge of keeping people motivated to hit the metric. And what we found is we identify halfway through the contest, the team leader picks the person who's been participating the most to take over as team leader. And so in the dip, when everybody's starting to feel like, okay, it's getting old, it's getting a little boring, we bring in a new leader, some new blood, some new ways of communicating, and it just revives the whole group and pushes them to the finish line.
Gosh, that's really smart. I haven't heard that before. What were you solving for when you tried that the first time?
The very first time we did a challenge, we did a debrief after it, and we talked about all the things that went wrong. And one of the things we noticed was halfway through, the participation died off. And I think the leader gets kind of fatigued. They get tired of pushing the team. They're a month and a half in. And I think that the people being led by that person as well are kind of getting tired of the messaging and the rah-rah coming from that person. So when you introduce the next person in, we realized that shot new life into the competition for the team, and we saw a spike in their activities.
Then you said communication might be the most important step of all. What do you mean by that?
So again, in the very first one we did and we debriefed, we realized we didn't identify all the different ways we were going to communicate and who was in charge of that communication. And so again, you run into fall off in participation if you don't clearly articulate who's in charge of it and where is that communication coming out. So we had someone in charge of the full team communication that went out via email. And then we had someone in charge of the independent groups. And then we had someone in charge of communicating with those leaders directly to ensure that their communication is in line with what we want for the challenge.
Love that. Okay. This is all starting to come together for me. Then what?
So after you do the preparation, then it's, you need to put the actual, what we call the playbook together. So I have a blank template that our team can fill out. And so you take the leaders of the team and you have them fill it out, and you literally identify goal, adoption, terms, rules, budget, prizes, and comms. And once you have that, you literally look at that on a weekly basis and you say, where are we missing the mark? Where do we need to continue to focus?
On an annual basis, how many of these sort of games and contests will you run? Are you all always running one?
No, Jason, that's a phenomenal question, because initially when we started this whole thing in 23, we were running them as often as possible. And here's what we realized. If you're running them all the time, they lose the luster of what a challenge or a game is. So what we've identified to find the most amount of success for our team is that we run at most 2 full competitions, and full being a quarter long. And then we can run at least one 30-day to 60-day competition that's not tied to teams, but that's tied to an activity. But if you go above that amount, you get almost zero participation. It's just another thing. It's not new and it's not exciting.
So on a contest like this, you have about $20,000, give or take. $15,000 for the big prize, another $1,500 plus the hard costs of your labor. Call it 20 grand all in for the contest. How much money did you make?
Well, we had a 105% increase in listings signed from the previous year. So it's a good return on investment if it's executed properly.
Yeah, I'll say.
Our agent reporting, this is the most important part, I think, is our agent reporting at the time was 50%, meaning agents were reporting their numbers 50% of the time. And by the end of the competition, it was 71%. And agent reporting was so important to us, and I think it's important to every team, because what you track, you can improve. And if agents aren't reporting, I kind of liken it to, if you're an individual agent, you're kind of like a wakeboard boat. You know what I mean? You're steering the boat and you can see everywhere around you. You don't need a lot of instruments. You don't need a lot of tracking. You don't need to see everything that's going on. But when you run a team, it's almost like driving a cruise ship, right? Like you can't see out the side. You can't see out the back. You rely heavily on the reporting and the instruments and everything that's coming your way to make decisions. And so if you have an agent population that's not accurately giving you information, then a lot of times you're making decisions off of a blind spot.
In a contest like 90 listings in 90 days, which ultimately gets you, in this case, to about 106 listings, give or take, what are they reporting and how often are they reporting it?
So we basically have a couple of metrics. So the first metric is daily reporting. That's the first metric. So we look at how many times they're reporting. The next thing that we're reporting is nurtures added per week. A nurture is someone who says that they're going to do something in real estate in the next 12 months or sooner. And then we report contacts per agent per week, added to database per agent per week, and appointments set. Those all have to be self-reporting in my opinion. And here's what I mean by that. So contacts, for instance, all of our agents work out of the database. So we can get about 70% of the contacts they're making. But they're also making contacts outside of that database. They're making face-to-face contacts. They're making contacts as they're driving down the road. They're making contacts on different forms. So there's a section of self-reporting for contacts that just has to happen for us to have the full picture and full scope of what our agents are doing. And so those 5 metrics to us are the most important. And I think if I were talking to a team, I don't think the same metrics are the same for every team. I think you look at where can you look to identify your gaps, and that's the reporting you need to look at.
For y'all, then, you must have decided that their ability to go present a listing presentation, and you were happy with the conversion rate. You didn't track meetings actually held and then conversions, and ultimately you were tracking listings signed. Is that how you got there? You were comfortable in the presentation skills of the unit?
That was on an individual basis. But here's the thing. We track that. We just don't need them to report that. So I think that's the piece that was left out is this is what we put as a responsibility on them to self-report. Outside of that, of course, we track all of the metrics, and then on an individual basis, we look at where their gap is. So if someone's obviously setting the appointment, meeting the appointment, but not closing the appointment, we're working on their skill set, on what they're saying and how they're saying it.
So at the end of the day, you took 106 listings in 90 days, which is awesome. What's the one thing? How come that doesn't happen every 90 days? What is it about this contest and whatever you did that resulted in the final product that you got?
I honestly think that we live in a ongoing dip cycle. As human beings experiencing the emotions that we have and the rewards that we have and sometimes the setbacks that we have, meaning if we just ran a listing contest 12 months out of the year, there's nothing that is hacking that dopamine response that gets people to want to act. You know, we could talk about purpose all day. We could talk about pushing towards your personal goal. And still, there are those moments where you just don't have the chemistry that it takes to make that next call. And so I think it works because we're hijacking that.
So if I'm going to go and I'm going to kick off a contest tomorrow on my team, or even just for myself as an individual, where is this going to go wrong for me? Like, save me the pain. I'm going to go do this for the first time. It's going to break. Where can it break and save me the trouble?
Okay, first of all, you're not going to start it tomorrow if you decide today. You're going to plan tomorrow. And you're going to plan the next day, and you're going to plan the next day, and you're going to ensure that all the questions are answered up front. Then you're going to put a big, call it party/meeting together. We tend to launch ours at our 12-week sprints. We get together with our team every 12 weeks and we replan and recalibrate our goals for the next quarter. So we always get together at a 12-week sprint. That's where we have a big announcement. We have balloons, we have refreshments. We get people excited about the process. So if you're not upfront getting people excited about what it's going to be and what it's going to do for their business, then I think you'd miss the mark. And then going through it, if you don't identify how you're going to communicate with people and articulate that to the people that are responsible for it, it'll fall off in the first 3 weeks.
Makes perfect sense to me. It's kind of a no-brainer, man. Like, if you look up, especially as the market is changing and you're trying to lead people, galvanizing them to a challenge. And there's this idea that came out of ancient Japan, right? It's called the Misogi Challenge. The concept is that the challenge is so big that people would do this on an annual basis, right? Or even just once in your life. You could do it as often as you want, but it forces two things to happen. Number one, change the way I think. And then number two, change the way I behave.
Yep.
And what you've done is you've instituted a Misogi challenge around listings in this moment to bring culture and camaraderie together.
That is exactly right. In fact, if you think about the year that this concept, well, when I say concept, the way we approach it was in 2023. What was 2023 in real estate?
Well, it depends where you were in the country, but it wasn't as good as 18, 19, 21.
Right. It felt way harder in 23 than it did in 21 and 22. And that's where this whole concept was born, was we were up against agents feeling stress and anxiety and fear about what's happening in the market, not knowing what's coming. You know, a lot of talk in 23 and 24 about the lawsuit. And so we had to find a way to grab their attention and bring it back inside of the walls and inside of what's important, which is honestly, just do your job and do the activities, and you'll always find a result, because there's always people buying and selling real estate in any market. We just had to ensure that our team was going to get the unfair share, regardless of the market conditions.
I think it's genius, man. All right, I want to switch gears. I want to go back to ancient Athens. There's a philosopher named Epicurus. He has this amazing villa, and he invites people over to his garden to talk about the challenges of life. Will you join us in our garden?
I'd love to.
So you have a really unique skill set. You can sit on the phone in a TCPA friendly and compliant way for 13 hours. You can bang it out. You can make your own luck and you can make as much money as you want. But at some point, you decide to stop doing that and lead others. You don't account for any of the production on this team for the most part. Why did you do that?
I came to a fork in the road. And the question that I asked myself was, am I going to get really good at selling real estate, or am I going to get really good at leading people who want to sell real estate? And I didn't feel like I could do both to the best, like 110%. So I felt compelled to choose. And so I chose leadership. And let me tell you right now, it was steps backwards in that decision, but it was for the greater good, in my opinion, for the people that I was in business with. And there's nothing more rewarding than having an organization of people who are phenomenal salespeople and who trust my leadership in good and bad markets. And so I just made the decision at the time, like, I just need to go all in. I need to jump both feet first, and I need to step out of production. And by the way, like, I did that in 2016. So I was 2 years into the business when I decided to do that.
You have a business partner and you both run the company together and you're having extraordinary success. It wasn't always that way. I mean, you've had some tough times and you guys have had to weather tough markets and better markets and going backwards and going forwards and being confused and getting clear. What's the key to being in a relationship where the effort won't always be equal, but the money split always is?
I heard a relationship coach say this once. You know, they talk about a relationship between, a husband and wife or, significant others or whatever you want to say. And they say it's not always 50-50. Sometimes it's 80-20. Sometimes it's 70-30. Sometimes it's 60-40. And then it goes the other way as well. And I think what they're trying to get across is a good partnership understands when someone is over capacity or needs the additional support. A good partner will step in and they'll take on that additional support and vice versa. And so I think that's step number one, is realizing that it's not always 50-50 and coming to grips with the fact that is a true partnership. And then the second thing about a good partnership, in my opinion, is you have to be extremely open-minded to conflict and to alternative opinions, because although it's not always 50-50, the decision-making is 50-50, right? And so if there's something I really want to do or I'm really passionate about, I have to take a step back and I have to let my partner be a black hat and I have to let them tell me what could go wrong. And by the way, that's a lot of times has saved us from making poor decisions. So
yeah, makes sense to me. All right, City of Trees. You didn't name it after yourself. It isn't the Hanson Group. It's City of Trees Real Estate. What does that mean?
So first of all, Boise is known as the City of Trees, right? And so I have for whatever reason, I didn't go to school for it, but I just have a natural marketing sense. And so when I was trying to think of a name for the company, I wanted to think of something that was going to constantly be reinforced through other parts of our community. So I found City of Trees. I looked up City of Trees Real Estate. The URL wasn't taken. The LLC wasn't taken. And I'm like, okay, I think I may have stumbled on something. And here's what I mean by that. I thought if I could brand and market City of Trees Real Estate heavier than any other City of Trees business in Boise or event in Boise, then every time those other businesses or events were mentioned, people would think of me. And so I did. I heavily marketed the brand at a really high level. And so, we have the City of Trees Marathon. We have a multitude of businesses that start with the word City of Trees. And I have people all the time come and tell me like, hey, when we hear about the City of Trees Marathon, we think about you.
That's so good. It's smart, dude. Name recognition and affinity. Final question. You're having really incredible growth in a relatively changing market. What's the one thing? Why are you having the growth that you are right now when so many other real estate companies are contracting?
I think a lot of teams think that someone who is successful and in production would say no to joining their team. And so what we did is we put a one-pager together, thanks to you and Gary, and we identified an avatar And what we realized is, number one, we're really good at supporting talented people at a high level. Number two, we realized that talented people want to get into partnership with people more than we believe. And so our one thing is we meet with top producers a minimum of once a week to discover what it is their challenges are and what they need in their business. And then if we can solve it, we just establish a relationship with them and show them ways to solve it.
Top producers want to have games like this? Like if I'm a top producer, do I roll my eyes at 90 listings in 90 days? Because I think one of the mistakes people make is they think that these kind of gamifications are for newer agents or underperforming agents. How do top performers like playing games?
Okay, so first of all, we meet with them once a week and we ask them what their challenges are. What we've identified is 3 challenges, right? Operationally and consistency in their business. And then the third one is they feel alone. And so these challenges actually bring human connection and participation and excitement back into their business. So they're actually not rolling their eyes. They're actually jumping on board faster than, some of the more seasoned agents on our team that have been here for years. They're excited to participate in the community. So I actually think that the competitions that we run have been an integral part of incorporating them into the culture of our business.
Brilliant. Dude, I love it. Brent, I love what y'all are doing. I think you're crushing it. I'm all in for City of Trees. Well done, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Do you see why we had to do this episode? Because I don't care if you're a solo practitioner or running a team. The truth is, it's hard to maintain a constant source of motivation in order to come in and do the things that need to get done, especially as the market is shifting around us. So the idea that you're going to have some sort of a contest makes all the sense in the world to me. And Brent lays it out really clearly. Number one, we have to start with the clarity curve and understanding why. So for each person in your universe or yourself, why is this important to me? Why am I doing this? Because here's the reality. When life gets difficult, being connected to why you're willing to persevere through it is very important. Then simply, what's the goal? What are we doing? What's the goal of the challenge we're about to have? Then how are we going to get adoption? What are the actions that everyone's going to take? What metrics are we going to be tracking? And then when we actually do this in practice, are we doing it as solo people? Are we doing it together with others? Are we doing it as teams? And if you follow those simple steps, you're going to start to get results. And then inevitably what happens is people get squirrely as the competition keeps going. And this is the part that I think is genius. You have to regularly change out who's leading each of these teams or who's leading the entire contest because the new leader brings in fresh legs. Here's what I know, friends. We talk about how you're going to actually change parts of your life. And one way to think about it is this idea of Misogi challenge. And I talk about this all the time, and I haven't shared it with y'all. Think of it like this. If you were to go back in time, you'd find this concept of Misogi. And the idea is that you would put a challenge that's so big out in front of you that it would force you to do 2 things. Number 1, change the way you think. Number 2, change the way that you behave. That's the idea behind a Misogi challenge. And if you bring these concepts into your life, you can have real change really quickly. Have any of you heard of this 75 hard idea? I don't know it exactly, but it's like you drink a gallon of water every day, you work out twice a day. One of those workouts has to be outside. You don't eat any sugar, you don't drink any caffeine. There's more. You read a book every day, and you got to do this for 75 consecutive days. Friends, that's a Misogi challenge. You know why it works? It works because it's so profound that it forces you to change the way you think and then the way you behave. Here's my question. What's the challenge you have running in your life right now that's helping you change it? That's helping you get different results? Brent and Chase, they simply built it into their business model, and that's what's genius about it. Go forth and do likewise. There it is. That wraps another episode. Friends, I don't know what you're taking out of this. I really don't. I'll tell you what I want you to be taking out of it, which is these are the people that are having tremendously big lives. And the reason it's happening is because they're setting up the models and systems to do just that. Gary Keller told me that leadership is teaching people how to think so that they do the things they need to do when they need to do them so that ultimately they get the things they want when they want to have them. And that's what I want for you. You're all leaders, but it begins with leading ourselves. If you're enjoying this podcast, I want you to click the subscribe button anywhere that you get your podcasts. We want to be the voice in your head every single week. And every week we're dropping new content. We also send out a newsletter at the conclusion of every show to make sure that you get the highest points in the models and systems that were discussed. So if you want to sign up, I need your name and your email address. Head over to the millionaireagentpodcast.com. millionaireagentpodcast.com. Enter your name and your email address, and every week that newsletter will be in your box. Friends, you just went on a journey. I hope that what happens between now and the next time we meet is absolutely wonderful for you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not Keller Williams Realty LLC and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information. Warning: you must comply with the TCPA and any other federal, state, or local laws, including for B2B calls and texts. Never call or text a number on any do not call list, and do not use an auto dialer or artificial voice or pre-recorded messages without proper consent. Contact your attorney to ensure your compliance.